Camila always believed that work dignified the human being, but in the town of San Esteban, that idea seemed like a cruel joke. There, dignity was measured by the family name, by the size of the house, by the amount of gold in one's hands. The poor had no voice. They only served. And among all of them, Camila was the most invisible. Every dawn before the sun touched the tiled roofs and the roosters began their crowing, she would leave with a worn bag over her shoulder, filled with rags, cheap soap, and broken hopes. She walked down the main street, where the neighbors already watched her, with that mix of pity and scorn that only hypocrites know how to conceal. The cleaner woman, they called her, as if she didn't deserve a name of her own. The air smelled of freshly baked bread and indifference. Windows closed as she passed, children laughed in hiding, and market women whispered about her without even lowering their voices. But Camila didn't respond. She knew that in San Esteban, those born humble had to learn to swallow their pride or starve. Hers was a silent existence, marked by routine and by wounds that don't bleed but weigh heavily. Every day began the same. Cleaning other people's houses, enduring orders, pretending she didn't hear the insults disguised as jokes. And among all the houses, there was one that made her tremble just by seeing it in the distance. The Ortega mansion. That family had everything: power, money, and fear. The mansion, a white stone construction with iron gates, stood on the highest point of the town as a constant reminder of who was in charge there. The Ortegas were heirs of generations of privilege, known both for their wealth and their silent cruelty. Doña Ramira, the matriarch, had inherited the character of the late Don Esteban Ortega, her husband, a man who in life was venerated as a saint. Although many knew his fortune was built on the backs of the poor, Camila had worked there since she was 17, cleaning floors so shiny she could see her reflection, though she never recognized herself in it. The work was hard, but the humiliation was harder. Ramira gave her orders without looking at her, as if Camila were a tool, not a person. Clean harder. Don't look at the paintings. Don't breathe here. The children, arrogant adults, barely remembered her name. Yet, Camila resisted, because every coin she earned meant one more night of medicine for her sick mother. Lucia, her mother, lived in a rented room, bedridden, battling an illness that stole her strength but not her tenderness. Camila cleaned other people's houses so the woman who raised her with love would not die without dignity. One afternoon, while waxing the floor of the main office, she heard voices in the hallway. She recognized the haughty tone of the Ortega brothers. "That will should have been destroyed years ago," one said. "No one needs to know about that bastard." That word struck the air. Bastard. Camila froze. She didn't fully understand what she was hearing, but something inside her tensed. Then she heard a name, barely a whisper but clear enough to chill her blood. Lucia. That name echoed in her mind like thunder. It was her mother's name. She felt her heart clench. She pretended to keep cleaning, but her mind was no longer there. The words repeated over and over. Will. Bastard. Lucia. When the brothers left, Camila slowly approached the desk. A drawer was left slightly ajar. Inside rested a yellowed letter written in nearly faded ink. Curiosity overcame fear. She took the paper with trembling hands and began to read. The letter was signed by Don Esteban Ortega. In it, he spoke of a woman named Lucia, of a forbidden love, of a daughter he could never acknowledge. He said his greatest regret was not having had the courage to face his family and recognize her. Camila felt the floor move beneath her feet. Her mother, was she that Lucia? And she, the unacknowledged daughter? For a moment, she wanted to think it was a coincidence. But the name, the date, the words, everything coincided too closely. Before she could react, a voice startled her. Doña Ramira was in the doorway with an expression of contained fury. The letter fell from Camila's hands. There was no opportunity for explanations. Within minutes, all employees were summoned, and Camila was accused of theft. No one defended her. No one asked what had happened. The matriarch simply said, "We don't need thieves here." And the words became a sentence. Camilla was fired in front of everyone, with the murmurs of the servants serving as background applause. She walked in the rain, still in her uniform, her pride shattered and the letter hidden within the damp fabric. Every step hurt, but something inside her, a spark, that even humiliation couldn't extinguish, ignited. That letter was a key, and behind that door was a truth too big to be buried. That night, upon arriving home, she sat beside her mother's bed. Lucia was asleep, breathing with difficulty. Camilla watched her, trying to imagine her young, in love, with eyes full of hope. Then she understood. This story was not just hers, but of a generation silenced by fear and shame. She hid the letter in a wooden box, next to an old medal and a black and white photograph. Then she stared out the window. The town slept, but she didn't. Outside, the Ortega mansion shone on the hill illuminated by the moon. Camilla knew that behind those walls were secrets no one dared to speak aloud. But soon, everything would come to light. Because there are truths that even money cannot bury forever. If this story touched your heart, leave your like and comment. Fate always returns what injustice steals. Dawn arrived with a deceptive calm. Camilla didn't sleep that night. She spent hours observing the letter again and again, searching the writing for an error, something that would disprove what she already feared to believe. But there was none. Every word, every stroke, confirmed that the late Don Esteban Ortega had had a secret relationship with a woman named Lucia, her mother. Outside, the town woke up normally. Children ran, men opened shops, church bells struck 7. No one imagined that, in a small room with cracked walls, an ordinary woman had just discovered that her blood was tied to the most powerful family in San Esteban. Camilla dressed in the same uniform, although she no longer had a job. Instinct led her to walk to the hospital where her mother was admitted. The path seemed longer than ever. Every step raised dust and memories. The words of the letter resonated in her mind. If one day someone reads this, let them know that what I loved most in my life was what I could never acknowledge. Upon arriving, the smell of disinfectant and sadness enveloped her. Lucia slept, pale, fragile. Camilla sat beside her, holding her hand. Gently. She didn't need to say anything. The letter, folded in her bag, spoke for her. The hours passed slowly, and when Lucia woke up, it was enough to show her the paper. The woman's face transformed. First surprise, then fear, and finally contained weeping that seemed to drag decades of silence. There were no words, but her gaze confirmed what Camilla already knew. It was all true. Don Esteban Ortega had been her father, and Camilla, his granddaughter. The revelation fell like a lightning bolt onto her heart. She felt neither pride nor happiness, only a new weight, that of a stolen history. Because while she lived among rags and brooms, her blood had been hidden out of shame. Lucia explained to her, between pauses and tears, that Don Esteban had tried to find them years ago when he learned he was ill. But Ramira, his wife, had prevented it. She ordered the letters destroyed and concealed the names of the mother and daughter he had wanted to acknowledge. She said she wouldn't allow a stain on the Ortega name, Lucia recalled. Camilla listened, her soul divided between rage and compassion. She understood that her mother had lived an entire life fleeing a name that actually belonged to her. That night, as the wind rattled the hospital windows, Camilla made a decision. She would not allow herself to be humiliated again. Not because she wanted money or revenge, but because she deserved the truth. The next day, she visited the oldest notary in town, a tired-looking man named Don Ramon. He had worked for the Ortegas decades ago. She showed him the letter, and after reading it, he fell silent. His eyes filled with a mix of astonishment and respect. "This is not just any paper," he murmured. "This changes everything." Don Ramon confirmed that Don Esteban's original will mentioned an heiress, born out of wedlock, daughter of Lucia. But the document that was made public had been altered. Ramira and her children had removed all reference to that daughter. Camila then understood that the injustice had not only been moral, but legal. For years, her family had been deliberately erased as if they had never existed. The news spread quietly. In the cafes and markets, the murmurs grew. Some scoffed. The cleaner woman now thinks she's an Ortega. Others feared what was to come. The silent mansion on the hill seemed to watch her with contempt, but she did not back down. She began gathering evidence, talking to former employees, reconstructing the past piece by piece. She discovered receipts, notes, and photographs hidden in the municipal archives, all signed with the same name, Esteban Ortega. One afternoon, returning home, she found the door ajar. Her mother, was asleep, but someone had been there. The box where she kept the letter was open, and the paper had disappeared. Panic engulfed her. She searched the entire room, but there was no trace. Someone had followed her. Someone knew what she was doing. The truth she had found now became a danger. She looked out the window toward the hill, where the Ortega mansion shone with its lights on. In that instant, she understood. They didn't just want to deny her existence. They wanted to silence her. Camila did not cry. She closed the window, took a deep breath, and promised herself something. If they wanted war, they would have it. Because a lifetime of cleaning up others' dirt had taught her one thing. All wealth has stains, and she was ready to expose every one of them. As the clock struck midnight, she began to write a new letter. This time, not to hide the truth, but to leave a record that the Ortega story would never again be told with lies. And in that silent decision, the real change began. The fear that had accompanied her all her life transformed into fire. She was no longer just a fired employee. She was the granddaughter of the man everyone venerated, the heiress of a name that had rejected her. And although the entire village didn't yet know it, the echo of her name was beginning to awaken within the walls of silence. If you feel that the truth always ends up coming to light, leave your like and comment. Nothing remains hidden forever. Dawn brought a dense silence, as if the entire town was holding its breath. San Esteban woke up to its usual routine, but for Camila, nothing was the same. The truth she had discovered was no longer just a suspicion. It was an open wound that burned every time she looked at the hill where the Ortega mansion stood. Knowing her blood belonged to that powerful family filled her with rage and, at the same time, a strange sense of justice. However, the fear was still there, lurking. The letter's disappearance confirmed that someone was watching her, someone willing to erase her history once again. In a place like San Esteban, secrets didn't die. They just changed hiding places. That morning she returned to the hospital. Lucia slept, fragile, her face consumed by the illness. Camila sat by her side and stroked her hand without saying anything. She didn't have the courage to tell her the letter was gone. She feared the news would completely shatter her spirit. Inside, however, a new determination simmered. It was no longer enough to know the truth. She had to prove it. She had to rescue her mother's memory and unmask those who had spent years denying their existence. It was an unequal battle, one woman alone, against an entire dynasty. But Camila had spent her whole life fighting in silence, and silence was her best weapon. She searched again for the old notary, Don Ramon, the only one who had dared to look at her without disdain. The elderly man, with trembling hands, showed her the old records of the original will. On a yellowed page, almost faded by time, appeared a paragraph omitted in the official version. In case of my death, I assure financial assistance to Lucia's daughter, in recognition of my responsibility. No name was mentioned, but it was enough. It was the evidence confirming that her mother had been part of Esteban Ortega's life and that, therefore, Camila was his descendant. Don Ramon looked at her seriously. This won't be easy, he said in a grave voice. When you touch the blood of the rich, their true poison is unleashed. Camila didn't reply. She knew he was right. For weeks, she scoured the town looking for witnesses. She spoke with former employees of the mansion, with a seamstress who had once made dresses for Doña Ramira, with a retired gardener who remembered seeing a young woman named Lucia entering through the back door on summer nights. They all agreed on one thing: Lucia existed, and someone made sure to remove her from the official story. Each testimony was another brick in the construction of the truth, but the further she advanced, the more hostile the environment became. The market neighbors watched her with long stares. Laughter ceased when she passed, and some men began to warn her to stop. "You gain nothing by stirring up the past," they said. But she understood the subtext. What shouldn't be stirred up was not the past, but the power. The pressure grew. One afternoon, upon returning home, she found the door ajar. The air smelled of unfamiliar perfume. Her wooden box where she kept the documents had been moved. The sensation of invasion ran through her body like a sharp coldness. There was no doubt. They had been there, looking for what she protected. In that instant, she understood that she was no longer a small threat, but a stone in the shoe of a family that tolerated no stains on its legacy. She sat on the bed, trembling, and understood that the only way to protect herself was to expose the truth before they destroyed it. Thus was born the idea of going to the local press. It didn't have much reach, but it was enough to spark a flame. She told the story without mentioning names, describing a woman who had been erased from the will of a powerful man. The article came out on a Saturday morning, discreetly, without photographs. However, in a town where secrets are currency, that small publication struck like thunder. By Monday, the whole village was talking about the scandal. "A cleaner woman claims to be an Ortega heiress," they murmured. The gossip ran from house to house, and the mansion on the hill filled with shadows. Doña Ramira's reaction was immediate. She canceled visits, fired 2 employees, and forbade her children to discuss the matter. But the rumor had already escaped their walls. The town lawyers began discussing the case, and one of them, a young man named Julian, sought out Camila. He explained that there was a legal possibility, requesting the reopening of Esteban Ortega's inventory of assets based on the old records and the witnesses. It was a risky but legitimate move. Camila accepted without hesitation. It was no longer a matter of money or pride. It was a matter of identity. She wanted the world to know that her mother had not been a shadow, but a woman with a name, history, and a right to be remembered. News of the lawsuit spread like wildfire. The mansion became a field of tension. Ramira began making frantic calls to old acquaintances in the courts, seeking to stop the process. But it was too late. The notary, tired of so many years of silent servitude, confirmed the existence of the omitted document to the authorities. And what was until then a rumor turned into a fact. The Ortega family had hidden a modified will. The town, which previously scorned Camila, began to look at her with a mix of fear and respect. Some avoided her. Others tried to approach, feigning interest. Hypocrisy changed its face, but it still smelled the same. However, along with the truth came another burden. The Ortega name no longer sounded like power to her, but like guilt. She understood that the blood tie was not an honor, but a burden. Every revelation, about her grandfather brought with it a story of injustice, of bought favors, of silences purchased with money. And Camila understood that being an heiress to that legacy was also inheriting its sins. That night, as the wind hit the window, she looked up at the sky and promised herself that she would not allow her story to become just another one that power manipulates to clean its face. The weight of the blood was no longer a curse, but a responsibility. From that moment on, it wasn't enough to discover the truth. She had to uphold it, protect it, make it count. Because she had learned that justice does not always come dressed in laws or inheritances, but in courage. And deep down, she knew the worst was yet to come. If this story moves you, support it with a like and write. The truth always finds its way. From the moment the case went public, the town of San Esteban was no longer the same. People began to divide into 2 camps: those who supported Camila, admiring her courage, and those who saw her as a threat to the established order. Glances became knives, whispers, poison, but she remained firm, moving with a calm that concealed a growing fire. Every step she took towards the truth seemed to awaken a new shadow. It was as if the town walls, accustomed to keeping secrets, began to creak under the weight of memory. The Ortega family, accustomed to dominating everyone with money and reputation, began to feel the pressure. The mansion, which had always been a symbol of power, now seemed like a mausoleum guarding guilt. Doña Ramira avoided going out, fearing confrontation with curious glances. Her children argued behind closed doors, while lawyers constantly entered and left. The Ortega name, once pronounced with respect, now sounded like a dangerous word. And in the midst of it all, Camilla walked with a serene step, knowing that the war was not just for justice, but for dignity. The legal process advanced slowly, but every document, every testimony, added weight to her favor. The notary Don Ramon gave his formal statement to the authorities, confirming the existence of the original will. The local press amplified the case, and soon city newspapers began covering the story of the cleaner heiress. The town, fascinated by the scandal, began to reconstruct its version of events. Some said Camilla sought revenge. Others insisted she only wanted money, but no one could deny the truth. The Ortega family had lied for decades. Meanwhile, Camilla spent her nights reviewing documents, noting dates, organizing evidence. Exhaustion mixed with an unbreakable energy. She had found purpose amid the chaos. However, something worried her. Days passed and she had no news from Julian, the young lawyer who had enthusiastically taken her case. She tried calling him several times, with no response. Until one afternoon, she received an unaddressed letter, left under her door. Inside was a single, typewritten sheet. Stop before you lose everything. There was no signature, but the message was clear. Power was growing impatient. For the first time, fear touched her again. Not for herself, but for Lucia. Her mother was weak, and any disturbance could worsen her condition. Camilla understood that she had to protect her, even from the truth. She moved her to a safer clinic, using money she had received from anonymous donations offered by some neighbors. The whole town talked about the case. It was no longer a hidden story. It was an open wound that everyone watched. But with the attention also came loneliness. Those who had smiled at her before began to avoid her, afraid of getting involved. Only a few remained by her side, recognizing in her something greater than a claim, the dignity of someone who refuses to be erased. One night, unable to sleep, Camilla decided to return to the Ortega mansion. She wanted to see with her own eyes the place where everything had begun. The gate was closed, but she found a side entrance where she used to pass when she worked there. The silence was almost sacred. She walked through the hallways, remembering every corner, every task, every humiliating word. She went up to Don Esteban's office, the same one where she had found the letter. There, in a corner of the furniture, she discovered something she hadn't noticed before. A small wooden box embedded beneath the base of the desk. She forced the lock with an old spatula, and inside, found several envelopes sealed with the late patriarch's personal stamp. Opening them, her breath stopped. They were copies of private correspondence between Esteban and Lucia, letters that spoke of love, remorse, and broken promises. One of them, dated just weeks before his death, explicitly mentioned the girl. I hope one day she can know who her grandfather was and that she doesn't inherit the guilt of my silences. Camilla broke down. Those words were the final confirmation, the irrefutable proof. But they were also a farewell. Esteban Ortega had tried to fix his mistake, albeit late, and his family had prevented it. With those letters in hand, there was no turning back. The next morning, she delivered the documents to the prosecutor's office. The media spread the word, and the news became national. For the first time, the cleaner woman's story was told without mockery or condescension. The entire village felt the shock. The truth, which so many had tried to bury, had come to light with a force that no one could stop. And as the Ortegas faced an investigation that threatened to strip them of their fortune, Camilla visited her mother. Lucia looked at her with tear-filled eyes. There was no need for words. They both knew that justice, though delayed, had arrived. Camilla took her hand and understood that everything she had suffered, the humiliations, the looks, the losses, had a purpose: to restore the dignity that was stolen from them. But she also knew that something was still missing. Worldly justice could punish, but not heal. Forgiveness, that last step, was still pending, and it would be the most difficult of all. If you believe that the truth always finds its way, leave your like and comment. No one can hide the light forever. Dawn arrived covered by a thick mist, as if the very sky of Sannier. Esteban was hesitating between calm and storm. The news had spread throughout the country. The cleaner woman who discovered she was the lost Ortega heiress. Newspapers made her a symbol of social justice. Radios mentioned her as an example of courage. But Camilla felt no pride. She felt emptiness. Because the truth which everyone glorified had arrived too late for her mother. Lucia had died 2 days after the final evidence was published, with a serenity that hurt. She died knowing the truth but without time to enjoy it. And Camilla, in silence, buried the only person who never treated her as less. The funeral was simple, without expensive flowers or false speeches. Some curious townspeople approached, feigning compassion, but Camilla didn't look at them. She just held her mother's cold hand and promised that her story would not be forgotten. That promise, more than a farewell, became her purpose. From that day on, she stopped being the girl who cleaned the mansion and became the woman who faced the Ortegas. But the price was high. The legal process had become a storm of documents, hearings, and declarations. The family's lawyers tried to postpone everything, alleging forgery, questioning every word of the will. However, the letters found in the late Esteban's office were impossible to deny. They were his voice, his signature, his truth. The judge ordered a complete review of the assets and the family registry. For weeks, the walls of the mansion witnessed something they had never known: surrender. The Ortegas had to hand over original documents, open accounts, expose the secrets of their wealth. Camilla watched it all with a mixture of astonishment and sadness. She had never wanted to destroy anyone, only to reclaim what was hers. But as the process advanced, she understood that justice was not clean. It was made of ruins, of pride, and of loss. One day she received a summons. She had to appear to hear the definitive ruling. The courtroom was full. Journalists, neighbors, onlookers. In the front row, Ramira Ortega, the woman who had made her life a hell, watched her with silent resentment, dressed in black as if she could still control the narrative with her mere presence. But this time power had changed hands. The judge spoke in a firm voice, reading each point with precision. He confirmed the authenticity of the letters, recognized the existence of the omitted inheritance, and finally ruled that Camilla was the legal, direct heir of Don Esteban Ortega. The silence was absolute. In that instant, history turned around. Camilla did not cry. She didn't raise her arms or smile. She simply breathed, as if finally releasing a weight she had carried since birth. When she left the courthouse, the air felt different. The same people who had scorned her before now looked at her with respect, even fear. Some congratulated her. Others murmured excuses to justify their former contempt. But she wasn't listening. Her mind was far away, at Lucia's grave. She knew her mother would have smiled, not for the wealth, but because, at last, no one could deny who they were. In the following days, the Ortegas began to leave the mansion. Old furniture was removed, portraits taken down, servants dismissed. San Esteban became the scene of a slow downfall. Rumors said the family planned to leave the country, seeking to escape the shame. And when the iron gates closed for the last time, Camilla walked up the hill. She walked to the office where everything had begun. The house was empty, but the air still smelled of dust and memory. She approached the large portrait of Esteban Ortega, observed it for a few seconds, and with a sigh said softly, "You can rest now. Your truth has come to light." Then she walked to the window. From there she could see the whole town. The same place that had once scorned her now watched her with amazement. But Camilla was not looking for applause. She knew that the inherited fortune was, in reality, a debt, an opportunity to repair what her family had destroyed. In the following days, she decided that the mansion would not be a symbol of power, but of redemption. She contacted local authorities and donated a significant part of the inheritance to create a shelter for working women, single mothers, and abandoned elderly women. She named it Casa Lucia, Lucia House, in honor of her mother, the woman who had silently endured the weight of scorn and hope. The announcement caused a commotion. Some called her a saint, others accused her of trying to clean her image. But she didn't respond. Justice didn't need publicity. Her purpose was different: to transform pain into something useful. Every room in that house, every newly painted wall, was a way of writing a new ending. In the hallways where she had once been humiliated, the laughter of women rebuilding their lives now echoed. Camilla understood that the true victory was not having power, but giving humanity back to a name that had been stained at birth. That night, upon leaving the mansion for the last time, she looked up at the sky. The town lights flickered in the distance. For the first time in years, she felt peace. She had won, yes, but not for the assets, nor for the name, but because no one could ever call her the cleaner woman again. She was Camilla Ortega, heiress of silence, daughter of sacrifice, granddaughter of a man who tried to redeem himself and failed. And although there were still shadows to dispel, she knew that the true legacy was not the money, but the courage to face the truth. Leave your like if you believe that power without justice is worthless, and right. Blood doesn't define, actions do. Time, that silent judge, slowly began to erase the echo of the scandal in San Esteban. The Ortega mansion, once a symbol of arrogance, was reborn with a new name and a different purpose: Lucia House. Instead of guarding portraits of haughty ancestors, it now housed real faces, women who arrived with broken stories and tired eyes, seeking a second chance. Camilla walked every morning through the same hallways where she had once been humiliated, but now the walls breathed life. She had transformed the place of contempt into a refuge of hope. That was her silent victory, the one that didn't appear in the newspapers, but that healed what neither courts nor money could mend. The town, at first, watched with distrust. Some thought her gesture was a strategy to clean up her image. Others simply couldn't stand to see her transformed into a symbol of something pure after having been a cleaner woman. But Camilla's constancy dismantled all doubt. She wasn't seeking recognition, only redemption. With every recovered smile inside the house, she felt that her mother was still alive. And little by little, the town's hostility turned into respect. Women from Noir, different corners of the region, began to arrive, some fleeing poverty, others violence, all with the same need to be seen. Camilla received them with a serenity that commanded calm. No one imagined that behind that strength, pain still resided. At night, when silence returned and the murmur of the village faded, Camilla sat in front of Don Esteban's old desk, the same one where she had found the first letter. That piece of furniture no longer represented power, but memory. In the drawer, she kept only one thing: her grandfather's last letter, the one that mentioned the girl he never knew. She read it sometimes, not with resentment, but with a strange tenderness. She had learned to forgive the man who had denied her without knowing her. She understood that the errors of one generation should not be the chains of the next. That understanding freed her more than any judicial victory. Because forgiveness, unlike forgetting, does not erase the wound. It transforms it. The Ortegas, reduced to an empty name, had left long ago. The mansion they so fiercely defended was eventually converted into an open space, and over the years, people stopped being afraid to talk about them. The new generations grew up hearing the story of the woman who